Welcome to another great Grassroots Gold Live. Tonight is a special episode. We have an extraordinary guest. I'm Tamara Colbert. This is my co-host for the evening, Paul Hodson, my co-founder at Grassroots Gold. Paul,
good evening,
I'm going to
all.
let you do the introductions for our guest this evening, and then I'm going to bring him up right away.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we are excited and blessed to have with us #1 best-selling author Steve Deace, a talk radio host, political commentator. He's been engaged at the grassroots level for quite a while in Iowa with the Iowa caucuses. So he's really, grassroots is his grounding, and he interprets and gives insight based on all that experience, which is going to be, we think, really helpful in this conversation today. We're going to talk about his #1 best-selling book. Let's bring on Steve.
Good to have you. Normally that's what I say.
Yeah, that's what you say.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. One of the things that we've been talking about as we've been listening to you, as we've been watching you on all your big famous show interviews and all of that, which is awesome because it keeps selling books and we need millions and millions of these books out there. You have an extraordinary story to tell about this, and we'd love for you to kind of share, because your instinct, which I think is extraordinarily important, and I think it's because of your grassroots instincts, your instinct forced you to write this book. Can you share with our viewers what that instinct told you to do?
Well, I mean, the genesis of Faucian Bargain, which if you go to the today, it's funny, someone pointed this out to me, and so I had to get a screen capture of it, because one of these things is not like the other. Right now, today at Amazon, the top 3 books in the political science category are Barack Obama's #1, I'm #2, and John Boehner's #3. All right. So you've got a former local guy, local sports guy in Des Moines, son of a 15-year-old mom, me, sandwiched between a former president and the former Speaker of the House, which is kind of funny. But the origin of behind Faucian Bargain, the most powerful and dangerous bureaucrat in American history, actually didn't begin with Anthony Fauci. It actually started with the Imperial College model. And I was sitting in this very man cave that I'm in right now, in my house, on March 16th of last year. And I had looked at some of the preliminary stuff on COVID-19. In fact, some of the preliminary things that even Anthony Fauci had said about it in January and February. And I was telling my audience, why are we panicking about this? I don't understand. And several members of my audience told me I needed to listen to a guy named Dr. Michael Osterholm from the Center for Infectious Diseases at the University of Minnesota. He had been on Joe Rogan's podcast. So I listened to that for an hour and a half, and Dr. Osterholm also said, hey, this will be a very serious virus, but it's not like it's the end of the world. We're not shutting the world down for it or anything. So I relayed what he said to my audience, and largely kind of just moved on with the rest of the events that we were covering. And then, I come home after doing the show on March 16th, and we had just launched 15 days to flatten the curve, and the country is shut down. And something about it just didn't seem right in my spirit, but some people whose opinions I still to this day hold in high regard in my industry were like, if you really don't believe this is for real, you need to read this Imperial College model for yourself. So I said, okay, I'm sitting down here and I've got 3 teenagers upstairs wondering what the future is for them, and I'll read it. So I went and read through the model, and on the surface, it seemed really convincing. And, my heart kind of sank. And I'm, you're contemplating as a dad, the future for your kids and things of that nature. And I just heard this still small voice in the back of my head say, you need to research Imperial College and global warming. So I just began doing that right after I finished the model. I spent about an hour and a half doing that, maybe 2 hours down here in the man cave. And I mean, what came up was a treasure trove of propaganda. One name kept coming up repeatedly. His name he's in the book. We mentioned him in Faucian Bargain, Jeremy Grantham. Mm-hmm. He is the benefactor one of the main benefactors of Imperial College. An entire wing at the university is named after him, and he's a multi-billionaire, and he's given about 80% of his wealth to ending what he calls the 250-year bubble caused by fossil fuels. Shortly after Imperial College came out with their model, they came out with an ancillary paper that didn't get nearly the attention, but it was about now that we faced this moment with the virus, this was the time basically to do a great reset, for lack of a better description. Take advantage of it, make the changes to our way of life, and impose the environmental changes that we've long been clamoring for. And I just got to thinking that's way too much of a coincidence, particularly because all the solutions in the Imperial College model were basically to perform a proto version of the Green New Deal. So I went back through and I read the model again. And I think, guys, that a lot of people think with models, you have to be a great mathematician to understand them. You don't. You have to be a great mathematician to utilize them, but understand that a model is not a formula. A model is the math that is the result of the assumptions of the modeler.
Right.
All right. And so that's now where we're dealing with logic and philosophy and worldview. And, you know, there were little things that on second read, I didn't notice the first time, because you just get so struck by all this data and death tolls, and your heart starts racing and sinking, and you kind of lose your discernment. But on a second read, I start noticing things like it admits in the model they don't know how the virus is spread. Well, then, I mean, how in the Sam Hill do you project the transmission of a virus that you don't know how it's spread? You don't know if it's droplets. You don't know if it's aerosols. I mean, that's kind of a big thing, right? To project the transmission of a virus, you would presumably want to have a pretty much, you know, pardon the pun, locked down how the virus is actually spread.
Right.
And it admits that, and there were a lot of those incongruencies in the model. And so when the assumption is flawed, like an argument, when the premise is bad, the conclusion is going to be off as well. And then I thought, okay, well, this looks like kind of a global warming redux. And maybe it was for Imperial College. But what I found next really blew my mind. And it was the fact that the day after Imperial College released its model, Dr. Sunitra Gupta from Oxford's Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, she's one of their epidemiologists there. Oxford's the #1 rated university in the world. She was in the pages of the left-wing Economist talking about what a garbage model this is. We shouldn't be doing it. Right away, you had people like Dr. Tony Katz at Yale, Dr. Martin Koldorf at Harvard. He helped design the VAERS incident report site for CDC that was created prior to COVID. I mean, there were illustrious academics all over the world who were like, what is this? We don't quarantine healthy people. I look at what John Ioannidis at Stanford University was writing for Stat News last March. His projections based on the Diamond cruise ship and about the virus, they've all turned out to be accurate. And so that's what really gave me the confidence now to go at this kind of on my own, frankly. And then there was a couple of other people that went there with me in conservative media. And then little by little, more and more began to join. But it was the confidence of knowing that there's actually not just ideological arguments against this, but academic ones too. And that there's a lot of people that are already pushing back on this that probably also come from universities that believe there's 57 genders as well. All right. And that brought us now to Anthony Fauci, who kind of became the singular face of this spirit of the age for our country.
Now, you know, as I look through this, your book, you know, there are just some extraordinarily poignant thoughts. And the one thought that I think is really incredible, and it's the first thought in your book, a republic. If you can keep it, here's why this is really important, because I think there is a serendipity happening related to liberty right now around the country. And when Paul and I launched Grassroots Gold in January, right the day that session started here in Texas, and that was our first day at the Capitol. And we've been out speaking all over the state. That is the theme of our training. We have a republic if you can keep it, not if Biden can keep it or Trump or anybody else. but that really was the clarion call, not just of the age, but how forward thinking. That's the clarion call for any liberty loving person. And so as I read through your book, that phrase just kept coming up over and over and over. And I don't know, I want to know how, as you're writing this, Steve, you're looking at people who are literally making what I see as like you're saying, a coordinated opportunity to fundamentally make the transformation that wasn't able to happen from 2008 to 2016. As you're reading this, are you just going, holy cow, the puzzle is coming together?
I mean, look how quickly they mobilized on this.
Right.
I mean, look how quickly the vaccination, and again, and by the way, I don't say this because I think if you are a vaccine skeptic, you should be ashamed of your view. I work with one every day on my show. In fact, the co-author of my book is one.
Todd.
But I just say this because it's not my view. Okay. But I don't. I mean, look how quickly they had the notion of a multi-booster vaccine ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Look how quickly they completely just besmirched hydroxychloroquine and then memory hold it.
Right.
Look how quickly they're doing it in real time right now to ivermectin, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You were not told to go outside in the sun, in the heat, work out, run, vitamin D, none of those things. But wait for a remdesivir, which is a fraud. And if they weren't attempting to discredit established cheap medications on purpose in order to set the stage for experimental vaccines that still are not FDA approved, what would they have done differently? I mean, if it wasn't coordinated, what would they have done differently? And I think that, you know, it's not that this sort of spirit of the age we're describing caused the virus. It's that they were waiting for a moment and they were prepared. And it could have been COVID-19, coronavirus, something else. But they were waiting for a moment to leverage all of their combined resources together for one major move against Western civilization. And this was it. Or at least they viewed that this was it. And a couple of things and lessons that I think are fascinating about this as we move forward into the fact that, number one, this is not an outlier now. This is an omen. You know, the spirit of the age has been wondering. We've had very divisive culture war issues in this country for decades. But despite those things, you had a Colin Kaepernick here or there, but for the most part, we've still found ways to enjoy Super Bowls, going to the movies, blah, blah, blah. The accoutrements of Americana, we largely were able to enjoy together, meaning I may passionately not believe in abortion, and I don't. I'm pro-life. But without me knowing what's going on in your family and in the decisions you're making, it's not really personal between you and me unless we're both activists on the issue. Meaning that when I come home at night, we that topic just would not come up again, unless we were both activists on the issue. And so there was still a way for us to still do some level of e pluribus unum around here. And the spirit of the age doesn't want that. It wants to tear this thing called Western civilization, wants to tear it asunder. And so what could it concoct that would make it personal? That it was a fight in every neighborhood. Everywhere you went, it was a battle. Every school district, it was a battle. Every job, it was a battle. Well, it just found out that if it uses the phrase public health emergency, that will create that scenario. We'll turn on each other. We'll bow the knee. We'll surrender without asking for a second opinion or getting any form of informed consent. And recently, you've seen Anthony Fauci did this on CNN last week, was talking about gun violence is now a public health emergency.
Right.
The current head of the CDC 2 weeks ago was talking about insufficient wokeism is now a public health emergency. They're going to make everything a public health emergency because now it gets personal. And we need to understand that that's the new going forward now. We better be, from a grassroots perspective, mobilized at that level of intensity. The second thing that I think you learned is how few Americans really are still interested in being such.
Yeah.
And how many Americans really don't want to be Americans anymore. The work that it takes, the research, self-government begins with self. And I think for those of us that are activists, and I get it, if you go around my man cave here, I've got the silly movie posters and, I wasn't feeling good the other day and my son and I just stayed inside on a gloomy, allegedly spring day in Iowa and just watched the 4-hour Justice League Snyder Cut for a second time and vegged out. I get all that. I love all the benefits of being an American as much as anybody does. But we have to recognize, though, we're going to be in a season here that we got to dial up the intensity of our engagement and activism. Because if we don't do that now, our kids are fighting a civil war later.
Yeah.
Or even worse than that would be, they're going to be lost to the spirit of the age.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a window here now. And I think now we know what kind of the tactic is going to be moving forward. And now it's really a question of, and it goes back to the what you mentioned that we started the book with from Benjamin Franklin. That's what consent of the governed means. A republic, if you can keep it. Are we willing to do what it will take to keep it? If we are, we will. And if we're not, we won't.
Right. So following up on that, it's very apparent that they had things in place and they've been trying this for decades, right? With multiple things. And you mentioned global warming / climate change. We now have gender confusion going on, the race issues that they continually bring up. And it really accelerated under President Trump as they were trying to bring him down because they wanted to accelerate and bring this to fruition, and the spirit of the age did. And they hit on personal health care, right? Saul Alinsky kind of said, go after healthcare. And it's kind of amazing they didn't figure that out. Now they're bringing all those other issues back and making them public health crisis, right? And they're going to try and get everything they want. And we are now faced and you have put it, and it's at the end of your book. And I think your book is, here's the specific issues of dealing with the pandemic, but the real overarching theme is, are we prepared as a people, as a nation, to, as you say it, to face the reality that we are not a nation of laws, and we never have been. We are a nation of political will, and we always will be. And that's precisely what Benjamin Franklin was saying. You just put it in a different phrase, but now we're going to be tested. Do we have the political will to do this? What are some of the things practically we can do as grassroots? Because we get this, I had a phone call today from someone, I need to know what to do. I'm ready. What do I need to do? Practically, what can we do?
Number one, you have to check your commitment level. All conflicts are won by the side who most believes in the righteous or the rightness of its cause. That's how 56 signers end up becoming the first L for the empire the sun never set upon, the British Armada. That's why we're going to leave Afghanistan later this year. And my only lament is we're not leaving it tomorrow. Right. We don't care about the dunghill Afghanistan. The people over there do. So they're going to fight us harder for it than we're going to fight them. All conflicts, all of them are eventually won by the side that believes the most in the rightness of its cause. If it was just simply and always about whoever had the superior resources, our history books would have a lot fewer pages. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of dead empires on those pages. So what we need to, number one, check our commitment level. When people say they're ready, are you ready? Really? Because Telemachus thought he was ready to stand up against the gladiator games in Rome. And so he did. Made an impassioned plea. They stoned him to death where he stood. However, the people of Rome were so appalled at what had happened to this lovable monk that he actually did end up leading to the end of the gladiator games in Rome, just not the way he had intended. So are we really ready? Are you ready to pay a price? Most of us right now won't risk, Aunt Petunia putting something snotty on a Facebook page. I think Joe Rogan's is a hoot. I don't listen to his podcast every day, and sometimes I agree and sometimes I don't. I love the fact, though, he's become a mega success by giving 0 Fs about what any of you think. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I see one more like Joe Rogan bro dude, email me. You know, the guy with he's got the 40-inch pythons and the bald head and the goatee. I'm ready for my Civil War, man. I'm like, dude, you're masking up your 2-year-old to go to Costco in Gretchen Whitmer's Michigan. Get the bleep out of here with that. You ain't ready for squat, bro. Okay.
Right.
So I think number one, you need to ask yourself, are you really ready? You ready to lose a job? Because I got to tell you, I went against the entire planet, basically, of media on COVID. Unless I did media in Sweden. And isn't that ironic? The nation that gave us Greta Thunberg was the control group against scientism on COVID.
Right.
It's just so strange. But I risked my entire career. If I'm wrong on this, I'm never doing this again. And nor should I. If I've incorrectly underestimated a pandemic and harmed people and caused maybe a loss of life, I knew going in that if I'm wrong on this, this is it. Told my wife, this is the all-in moment. All the chips are going in. If I'm wrong, we don't get a redo. We're doing something else for a living forever. So, are you ready to lose a job? Are you going to make them throw you out of that Walmart? Those are just practical questions of, are you sure you're ready? There's one of my best friends used to be a chief of staff for a member of Congress. And he tells me a story about how a bunch of the congressional aides on Capitol Hill one day went out and decided it was time to get some self-defense training. So they bring in a guy in. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's going to train them all on weapons and self-defense. This was his first lesson. He held up his Glock and he said, how many of you right now know for a fact that if something goes wrong, you will take this gun and kill somebody with it? Mm-hmm. And anybody that didn't raise their hand was thrown out of the class and given their money back.
Wow. And
he said, here's why you're not in the class. If I train you how to use this weapon, and then you go and possess one, but when the time comes, you don't have the stones it takes to use it, it will then be used against you and your loved ones instead. You're more dangerous knowing how to do this without being willing to do it than you would be never being trained whatsoever. And I think that applies to this. Are you sure you're ready to do this? If you go in a little bit halfway, in football, it's called alligator arms. This is when you go over the middle to catch a pass on a third down usually. And you feel that safety coming up over the top. So you just kind of stick those, like alligators have those little arms. You don't fully extend. You just kind of stick those arms out a little bit because you're afraid if you extend that you'll get hit hard. Well, the problem is that safety coming from behind you, he can't see your arms. He doesn't know if you've extended or not. So guess what he does? Whether you extend your arms or not, he hits you as hard as he can at full speed because he's taught to separate the man from the ball, not to wait for you to catch it. He doesn't want you to catch it. So you get hit anyway, whether you extended your arms to make the catch or not. So if you're going to go over the middle, you might as well go ahead, full extend, make the catch. Why take the hit for nothing? This won't be, can I do this 40%, 60, 75? This is not a graded exam. It is a pass-fail exercise. So that's my first practical step. Are you prepared to lose something? The respect of somebody you once had the respect of. The friendship of somebody, I can't tell you in this business how many friends I've lost, regained, lost again, regained again, lost again. It's amazing how I tend to have different friends depending on, do our issues and principles align at a particular point in time, okay? And then how I lose them when they don't. So I would actually just start with a self-assessment step, folks. Are you prepared to do this? Are you prepared? And if you're not, don't.
Right.
The worst thing that could happen, I'm the dad, finally, I'm at the state track meet. And I've seen enough of the bearded lady act taking the spot from my kids' team, my daughter's team. So I'm going to stand up in front of everybody and do something. And then a couple guys shout me down and I just skirt away. That's worse than doing nothing. Okay? Don't do that.
Right.
So be sure that you're willing to pay a price for this. That would be, I think, and I think that step, I don't know that we're honest with our people about that sometimes. And I think that we need to explain that and then not go to step 2 until everybody understands the cost of step 1.
Well, Steve, you really hit this, I think a week or two ago when you had absolutely you really have been spot on every day since election day. It's incredible. I've listened to you for years. I've known you for years. And I'm not sure what the Lord, he's using you. I can tell you that right now, because everything you are saying right now is 100% resonating with what I'm doing professionally, what I'm doing personally. And I think you had an inconvenient truth about America. It ties right in to the self-assessment, step 1, that it is an inconvenient truth. And if we do not admit where we're at and what is happening in our nation right now, we have a false self-assessment and we can't move forward. Mm-hmm. Can you share that perspective with listeners? And we're going to make sure we put a link to that segment on your show when our discussion with you is over, because it was so poignant. But it is an inconvenient truth, and we all need to stop dancing around it, and we need to say it for what it is right now that's happening in our nation.
So we're in the midst of doing a trilogy of activism videos. We haven't done the third one yet. We were going to do it earlier this week, but my allergies kicked in and I couldn't talk well enough. I'm actually hoping maybe we can do it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We haven't announced this yet, but our plan is to then later in the year put these videos as a framework for a study guide project for activists in small groups settings on how to practically do what we believe. And the title it's going to be is Do What You Believe, or You Won't Be Free to Believe It Much Longer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. But before we can get to Return of the Jedi, we got to introduce the Empire and everything in Star Wars first.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're talking about. We're doing the world building. And so the first video was An Inconvenient Truth, and it lays out in brutal detail really the state of things, that COVID is not an instigator, it's a harvest. Mm-hmm. That a culture has to be conditioned before it will just roll over and die the way that it has in the last year. And I don't believe you can fix a situation without an honest assessment of where you stood. I wasn't going to lose 100 pounds without admitting I had to lose 100 pounds, right? So the truth is okay. The truth is its own reward. Yeah. You know, that's the Christian experience begins with you acknowledging the truth that you are a sinner, right? The truth, you admit the truth that the problem is you. You're the problem. You look at the problem in the mirror every day. You're the problem, right? That's where it has to start. And by the time we get to the third one, you know, you will be getting encouragement. I just got an email before we started this here tonight. A gentleman had given his book to one of his liberal neighbors who was totally freaked out about COVID. And now he has noticed, he knows he read it. And now he's noticed in the last week or so, now he went from wearing his mask everywhere to wearing it intermittently. Now he even sees him out in the yard, not wearing it at all.
Wow.
God bless him. That's freedom. We didn't write this book for conservatives. We wrote it for people. people made in God's image, regardless of how they voted in that last election, the one before that, the one to come, right? And that, so there will be some of that. But I think I think we can't be effective, folks, if we're naive. And I remember years ago when I first got into activism here in Iowa and into media with using my show as a vehicle for activism. And I was invited to speak. I wish I could remember what the organization is called. I'd remember it if you guys gave me the name. It's a national organization of homeschoolers that take homeschool kids that are interested in getting involved in politics. And I just can't remember the name of it right now. And they were doing an event in Iowa. And so they had invited me to come and speak at the end of the day after the kids had spent the whole day up at the legislature and everything else. And typically when I speak in an event, my routine is I go find the corner stall in the bathroom. I don't ever have any notes. I just go find the corner stall in the bathroom. I get prayed up. And that way, whatever comes out of my mouth is not my fault. That's kind of how I roll. All right.
Good. That's how we roll too. That makes me happy.
So I get to the podium and I just look at these high school seniors and I'm just like, there's this voice in the back of my head saying these kids have no shot. I mean, they just look young, if you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Oh. It's not that they're younger. They just look like grist for the mill. And
right.
And I don't think, and I thought to myself, I don't think anybody's told them the truth. So I asked these kids, hey, they took you up to the State House today and you watched, committee hearings, you met the governor, your legislator, blah, blah, blah. And they all shake their head yes. And I'm like, so you guys think you have a pretty good handle on how stuff gets done around here, huh? And the kids were like all really earnest and stuff and said yes. And I said, okay. Hey, did they take you down to 801 Grand? That's the big fancy steakhouse here in Des Moines. I said, they take you down to 801 Grand at lunch so you could watch lobbyists buy your legislators martini and steak lunches. Did they take you down to watch that? Because that's where legislation really gets made.
Yeah.
And there was silence in the room, man. Silence. And from there, I just decided, you know what, man, the kids are old enough for the talk in a political context. You know what I'm saying? Right? And because here's what happens. If you send all these people naively off to battle, they end up coming out, man, broken, shattered. Yeah. They're dropping heaters, smoking pot, looking to self-medicate because they were told that all you needed was a Daniel Webster speech. Some great oratory like Jimmy Stewart gives at the end of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. By the way, you guys remember the end of that story. They don't do what he wants. It's a great scene, but the Congress doesn't do what he wants. Okay. So the idea that, they just hadn't thought about this. And thankfully, Joey Freshwater shows up with a great oratory and everybody's like, oh, by golly, gee whiz. Thank you so much for informing us. We'll come correct now. No. The kingdom of heaven is forcefully advancing and violent men lay hold of it. Mm-hmm. You better be ready to do what must be done and understand the level of animus you're up against. You're going against spiritual strongholds.
For sure. The
enemy doesn't want to see your neighbors free. The spirit of the age doesn't want you to be free. And the founders tried how many sternly worded letters to King George III? How many delegations did they send to the crown? How many years? The crown didn't care.
No.
And I think that we have to understand that the system doesn't care. The system isn't waiting for you to relieve it of its difficulty. The system is in need of you defeating it because of its difficulty. And I think that we have to start with that realization. A good pastor feeds sheep and shoots wolves, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
What's the difference? A sheep just doesn't know, but can be led. A wolf doesn't want to know. The system you're going into, there are people in it that are sheep, okay? But the system itself is the wolf.
So I want to follow up on that with a couple of thoughts and then a question for you. You've described something that I think we learned pretty early on, which I'm thankful we did, and that's the observation that conservatives especially are in a never-ending pursuit of having the perfect argument, and it doesn't exist, right? The one to convince, right? That's not how you win this game. You actually win. You win with a lot of numbers, overwhelming force, basically. You brought up the spiritual battle, so I wanted to kind of segue into an action which is on my heart, and it leads from this. We are a post-constitutional republic because we are a postmodern culture, but we've become a postmodern culture because our faith institutions have become post-orthodox for a long time. And I'm going to tie it back to COVID because, and I testified to this a couple of weeks ago down at the Capitol, all the churches need to open up right now, all the faith institutions. Yes. And I had my orthodontist, who is a conservative Muslim, and he always talks with me first before he starts working on my mouth. Hey, what's going on? But this time when I was visiting with him in January, it's like, what can I do? My daughter, who's now at an age where she likes boys, right? She's got, her friends are saying, are you sure you like boys? Why not? Why wouldn't you like girls? And I looked at him and I said, what you need to do, what we all need to do is we need to demand that our churches fully open, our faith institutions. That's how we're going to affect the culture. And that's another grassroots movement. And in Texas, churches have been able legally to be open, whether it's legal to shut them down in the first place is a different argument, since last May. And yet they're still voluntarily hiding, some of them. Right? Hiding from this COVID, which is not fake, because I've had it. It's not a fake thing, but it's not out there. It's not going to wipe everybody out. Our church has been open since last May, and it hasn't run rampant through the church. I got it. Ironically, on a weekend, I wasn't at church. Anyway, what's your thoughts on really from a grassroots and a faith-based perspective? We need to make our stand there right now.
Well, what you said about numbers is vitally important, first of all. Politics is a game of leverage, folks. It is a game of leverage, and whoever has the leverage wins. I didn't say it was a game of great arguments. Now, great arguments matter in terms of acquiring leverage. Can I inspire people to join my cause, for example? Right. But then ultimately, when we get down, that's where the argument is how I acquire the numbers to then have the leverage to exert the right pressure point on the system to get the result I want. Your argument will not alter policy. Your argument will allow you to quantify the numbers necessary to do so. For example, our book has more footnotes than pages. And it's rock solid, man. I didn't go down to the Valley of Elah with 5 smooth stones. I brought receipts. I brought footnotes. I got everything Goliath ever said. I brought it all. All right. But ultimately, someone then, a myriad of us have to go into our own Valley of Elahs with that information to exert enough influence, leverage in order to change an outcome. So I think that I wanted to address that first part you said, because I think that's vitally important. The great arguments that we're looking for is what gives us the numbers, but ultimately it's the numbers that give us the leverage, right? There's a formula to a process. Now, what you're saying about the churches are vitally important as well. You know, what is politics? And in terms of its purpose, the purpose, the essence of politics is the essence of the purpose of politics is this is how we fight civil war in America, so that we don't fight it in the streets. But the essence of it, right? The essence of it is faith and ethics in action. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of it. And if the institution that is the primary vehicle by which faith and ethics are taught, discipled, modeled, encouraged, inspired, is out of commission, why is every totalitarian society ever ban the Bible first thing? Why did it do it every time? Every time. Well, because they're trying to take away the most devastating weapon in the history of creation, the Word of God. That's why.
Correct.
And so if the institution that's charged with equipping us with that weapon is sort of the sergeant of arms, really, in a culture war, for lack of a better description, that's not the church's main goal or main mission. The church's main mission is the gospel. But the result of the gospel is it's going to create cultural conflict. Paul did not go to Ephesus to fight a culture war.
Right.
He went to Ephesus to preach the gospel. The problem is, when he got there, the worship of Diana and Artemis was that pagan religion was the very basis of its socio-economic environment. So he could not preach the gospel without coming head on into conflict with the culture of the Ephesians, because the basis of their culture was pagan. Him telling people Diana's not God, there's no power in Artemis, meant that a lot fewer people went to the idol store and bought Artemis idols. People start losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods. They take it personally. So the mission of the church is the gospel, but when the gospel is preached in a culture, it will come into conflict with a wayward culture. And so, yeah, we're missing a key step here. No question about that.
I think there's something that also is something we need to connect, Steve, and that's that Paul and I, we meet so many people as we're working up to this point in the Texas legislature. We've worked with Grassroots and brought enough groups and coordinated. We've brought over 1,500 people to the Capitol. And we're barely past the midpoint of the Texas legislative session, which is extraordinary. How best can we talk to people? You've got to speak truth. You've got to appreciate our nation. You've got to fight for that. Without it, America as a concept becoming idolatrous to us. And I know I struggle with that, because you can see behind me and in my office here, I've got, I love my flag. I love my red, white, and blue, and those symbols that I find meaning in, but there's no symbol I find more meaningful than my Bible. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we're communicating is that we can love our nation and stand up for truth, because I believe the Lord has created this divinely inspired nation we live in. But we've got to be able to walk that walk so that we are not idolizing America as a notion. What do you say about that?
Well, I think that you articulated the great challenge before us in this arena. And because we can't win the battle and lose the war. And, the original Bible answer man, Dr. Walter Martin, I listened to a podcast before he died. And it was an old interview of him on a podcast after he died, I should say. And he told a story about how he was hosting an apologetics conference one year. And a guy that belonged to a movement of a heterodoxical movement that claims Christianity as its origin came to the conference. And he was in the midst, Dr. Martin was, of just annihilating this heterodoxy. And in the middle of this young man stood up and challenged him in front of the crowd. And of course, he was no match for the answer man. And so he got spanked right there in front of everybody and humiliated. And he ends up abruptly leaving, and Walter continues on with his presentation. And a little while later, after it's over, he goes to the bathroom during the break, and that young man is in there. And he's crying. Because many of the things that Walter had told him about the origins of his outlier affiliation, he'd never heard. He didn't know any of these things. He just heard about Jesus and hung out with the Christian kids, and Walter realized, you know what, I have won the argument here, but I've lost him.
Right.
And I think that this also reminds me of a conversation my first year after I left local radio and tried to build a syndicated network. I ended up having a conversation at an NRB, National Religious Broadcasters Conference, with a gentleman who was an outgoing president of a major Christian political organization that I had done business with in my activism in Iowa, so we knew each other in presidential politics. And he told me that he thought he was retiring at the right time. It was a little early, but he said, I'm struggling because, Father, forgive them because they know not what they do. These pagans don't know that what they're trying to usher in is really going to end up being their own destruction.
Right.
And mercy triumphs over judgment. And I want to be there and minister to them, but I'm struggling because I'm looking around at the relics of this culture. These things come from my belief system. They're hijacking this from me.
Right.
They're robbing my kids of their birthright, of their way of life. And I don't know how to balance that, he said. I come from a generation where we were the majority and these people were the opposition. And now, at best, we're a plurality. Maybe we're a large minority. Either way, we need to add some people to our ranks, which means we got to persuade, change some hearts and minds. And he said, frankly, in my time, at my age, I don't know that I'm ready to do that because I'm too angry. And I think I struggle with anger, particularly in the last year, a lot. I've talked about this on my show openly. Yes. I see videos of guys getting assaulted at a Whole Foods at a mask. And I sit there and watch this video and I pray, please do this with me. Please. Because I'm swallowing so much bile right now that I don't know, man, maybe I'd get my rear end whooped, but I know this, we're going to find out. I'm going to exercise some pent up aggression. Now that is not the holiest and most righteous of responses. Right. But I also think denying that I'm struggling with it only makes it worse. It's almost therapeutic to let it out a little bit. And hear from other people, they're struggling with the same. And here's what gets me back into focus, guys. Jesus didn't die for a theology. Theology is vitally important. I've spent years myself as a layman studying it. It's vitally important, but it's not primarily important. Jesus died for people. Mm-hmm. While we were theologically orthodox, Christ died for us. Is that what Paul writes? No. Yes. While we were sinners, Christ died for us. And I think it is our prime directive is to remember that Jesus died for people. The casualties in our arena. Now, there's going to be wolves. I think Anthony Fauci is one. Yeah. There are times to say, you are a son of the devil. There are times to look at the Judaizers in Galatia and say, I'm so tired of your cultic obsession with circumcision. If you think you're so holy because of it, cut your whole penis off. Right. Show us how convicted you are. That's what he writes. And Paul writes that in Galatians. The same Paul that writes mercy triumphs over judgment. So there are moments for this. You see this in the Old Testament. Elijah mocking the prophets of Baal. Maybe your God's on the toilet. Maybe he's busy. Isaiah mocking the pagan indulgence of his people. How do you know which end of the wood to worship and which one to burn? Mm-hmm. So there are moments where this is required. The people need to see us smash the shibboleths of the damned. They need to see Samson plunge the temple of Dagon, the fish demon, face down into the dirt. They need to see sometimes a whip of cords. They need to see a show of strength. But remember that ultimately our goal is to win people. And I think if we focus on that, at least speaking for me, that slaughter the fatted calf, My son was lost, but now is found.
Right.
I think that's what we have to remember is that the spirit of the age has its disciples, but most people in its grip are sheep, and they need to hear a good shepherd. And I think that's the way that we navigate this very narrow road you're talking about, that and forge this path of the sorts of confrontational tactics it takes to win. Don't be so much concerned about whether your tactics are too mean or too nice. Start with, what are my motivations? And then that will inform your tactics from there.
Mm.
My motivation when I spanked my kids when they were young for talking back to their mom is the same motivation I have for taking them to Disney World last year. I love them.
Right.
So start with our motivations, and then let our tactics result and be informed by our motivations. Don't start with, am I enough of a badass, or am I nicer than God? That's a false choice.
Right.
What are your what's the motivation here? And then I think the tactics come into play from that point.
Great insight.
So, Steve, you talk about, you end your shows with John 3:17. Right. Christ died for us while we were yet sinners, right? It's a huge lift by our Savior. And something I am so eternally grateful for, because I think at the end of the day, you mentioned last week, I think it was in a second part where you list there were 25 or 26 different items that you list of, and one of these components was anybody that shares this like-minded view. We are going to have to come together and unite. And Paul and I, one of the things, every grassroots organization has their little fiefdom, and they want to keep it, and they get really protective of that. And one of the things we've tried to help people understand with these diverse organizations is, together we are better. We are stronger. We are united in a large force. So we've got to kind of leave our egos and our fiefdoms at the door so that we can unite. And let's unite on those things first that we can agree upon. And that is such a right vision for where we are at right now, right? Kind of that Ronald Reagan, if you believe in 80%, then you got to come together and work together. And we have to there's got to be a meekness, a humility, and yet that passion and understanding what our mission is, to be able to be inviting and warm, but resolute and firm in what we believe and how we're going to march on that. What do you say to that?
I think this is actually the easiest time ever for us to try to do this. I think the 80-20 thing, when we get into specific political issues, is harder, guys, because it kind of depends on what's in that other 20%. I mean, if I say to my wife and kids, hey, I'm going to provide blah, 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 but 20% of the days I get to smack you guys around.
Right.
They're going to suddenly think that other 80% is a little not as prevalent as it was until I told them what the other 20% was, right?
Right.
But the time in which we're in right now, I think this is actually a pretty simple process, because there's really one issue at stake. And this dawned on me recently, and this is what led me to say what you pointed out. I'm seeing, Andrew Sullivan is the Benjamin Franklin of America's gay rights movement. He's really the first celebrated gay intellectual in America. At least half of his Twitter feed every day, if I told you those were my tweets, you would believe it. He did it again with the stupid ideas of left-wing millennials. This is now 5 weeks in a row. I could have virtually given verbatim Bill Maher's Closing Ranch
Yes.
on HBO.
Yes.
5 weeks in a row. Naomi Wolf, the feminist author, is my new pen pal. Last weekend, she tweeted out her live thoughts while reading Faucian Bargain to her followers.
Wow.
And when we were permitted our own conscience and individual autonomy by the system, we argued with these people because the argument, we would say, you want to take your autonomy to places that God says don't do. They have societal consequences. They have human consequences, familial consequences, ethnic, racial consequences. There's a reason we have these limits. Don't erase them. And that was really the argument that the Steve Deaces and Andrew Sullivans of the world had about gay marriage for 30 years.
Right.
How far to take my own conscience? What's happening now, and you've seen it with COVID, is now the fight is, can I even form my own conscience at all?
Right. Right.
Can I think for myself at all? Can I do my own research at all? Can I inform myself at all? Will a few elites in corporate America and in government and in Silicon Valley, will they create a fascist oligarchy that will do all the thinking for us all? And I think this is now where you're seeing some people that we have some fundamental, and maybe if we're fortunate enough to win this conflict, we'll be reminded that some of these views, some of these differences are irreconcilable again.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, we are fighting to determine what is an irreconcilable view. What's a reconcilable view? Am I allowed to have a view? Or do I have to have the view? That's really the argument. Am I able to form my own conscience? And the reason Christians need to be particularly concerned about this, we do not have a circular reasoning faith. We are commanded to offer up reasons for the hope that we have. There's critical thinking right there. Jesus rose again from the dead and then appeared to other people, not because he wanted his resurrection to be esoterically debated.
Right.
He wanted it factually asserted. Critical thinking is inherent to a biblical worldview. It's inherent to it. The father of the 12 tribes of Israel, Jacob, given the name Israel, one who wrestles with God. Critical thinking is inherent to the biblical worldview. When Moses writes he created the male and female, we keep requoting that, rightfully in the context of the trans issue, in terms of the created order. But stop and think about the fact that this is the first time in all of human history that something claiming to be a sanctified, sacred writing equates the value of women from a creative inherent worth standpoint on par with men.
Mm-hmm.
Never before in human history until Moses wrote those words.
Right.
Had that ever been asserted. Ever. And supposedly we're the misogynistic ones.
Right.
Without critical thinking, we have a very hard time making arguments, because then it's just emotion. And the spirit of the age, the enemy's got the market cornered on emotion. It's really hard to emotionally make the argument that the same-sex desires that you can't overcome on your own and keep succumbing to are bad for you. When emotionally what you seek is validation. I'm tired of wrestling with my conscience. I want the validation for it. I'm tired of the guilt and the shame. Someone relieve me of this. Well, without us discussing where that guilt and shame comes from, you're going to seek an emotional pressure valve. That's human nature. We all do. That's why Adam grabbed a fig leaf, okay?
Yeah.
Instead of holding up his hand and say, my bad. He didn't do that. Grab the fig leaf, all right? And so if we get rid of critical thinking, the biblical worldview is doomed in this culture. Doomed. And if the biblical worldview is doomed in this culture, this culture is doomed. So critical thinking is the number one, the loss of it the number one issue facing the church and the culture. I think it's the number one issue facing us from an activism standpoint. Otherwise, without critical thinking, how do I reconcile the fact that several men who signed a document that said all men created equal went home to their slaves? Well, yes, that's true, but several other men went home and founded abolitionist societies. I mean, see what I mean? It takes critical thinking to negotiate the nuance required for self-government, for evangelism. Paul always went and reasoned in the synagogues. Went and reasoned. Have reasons. These are things of critical thinking. If we lose this, then you're a step away from the dark ages, man.
Well, we're right on the edge, Steve, because the mainstream media doesn't want alternative thought, right? There is no reason. You bring this up in the book. They don't want you to object to the passport, to the vaccination. This is the group think that tyrannical regimes take us toward, and think reason is not taught in our schools. The only kids that are learning reason are taught in homes like yours and Paul's and mine, to think for themselves, to question everything and never take anything at face value. How do we recommend that? I mean, really, there's a leadership vacuum. There are 100 million people right now, Steve, that are seeking. They are seeking leadership. They are seeking guidance. What do I do? Where do I go? And I'm so thankful for you, because through Faucian Bargain, you actually have a way to reach a lot of these people, right? And there's grassroots organizations that are right there in their neighborhood that can also help them, because we really have to kind of retrain thinking and logic and self-governance. We were meant to be self-governing. Galatians 5, to me, when I read Galatians 5 and what Paul writes about liberty, to me, my inspiration, when I reread that a few years ago, the Lord wrote liberty in our DNA. It is why men and women cross 90 miles of shark-infested waters to get to Florida from Cuba. It is why they are trekking 1,500 miles in Central America for some still notion of freedom, right? I mean, all these things, I think it is in our gene pool, and yet our education system has let us down. And now it is up to you and Paul and me and maybe 1,000 grassroots leaders across this country to re-educate 100 million people, maybe 50 million, on what that means. How do we tackle that without feeling daunted and discouraged? I think our opportunity is now, and it's exciting. I believe this is the best time to be here. What do you say?
When in doubt, emulate, if not flat out plagiarize, the only undefeated being in the history of the universe. Okay. What was Jesus's first? Well, depending on chronologically how you line up the Gospels, his first major public sermon is the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, but I say, this is an exercise in critical thinking. He is putting things into their proper context. And so that's one avenue that we have, to put things in their proper context. Mm-hmm. Don't respond with emotion with emotion. Several years ago, I had some good friends of ours say that, hey, when our son comes home for Thanksgiving break from school, will you talk to him? Because we really are concerned that he's departing from the faith. I said, sure, I'm happy to do it. I get together with him and I find out that, well, he had come home a few weeks ago with his laundry. He did have some legitimate questions based on what he was hearing from his atheist religious studies professor. He figured mom and dad would know the answers. They didn't. They got all defensive. And so now he's thinking they don't have any answers and the whole thing's made up. Right. All right. So they responded to him being propagandized with defensiveness. No.
Right.
Okay, don't do that. Put things back in their proper context, number one. And then number two, ask a crap ton of questions. Ask a lot of questions. Questions like, why do I have to wear a mask if I'm already vaccinated? Don't the vaccines work? Questions like, why am I getting vaccinated if I've already had it? Don't I have natural immunity? Questions like, why are you surprised that we were concerned that we weren't going to have enough vaccines for every adult before Memorial Day, and now we actually have a bigger, it's like the ventilators all over again. We have more supply than demand. Do you think maybe if you told people that if they got vaccinated, that would be the key to them returning normal life, they might be more likely to get vaccinated? Why would people get vaccinated with an experimental non-FDA approved substance only to still have to be a member of the COVID stand leper colony? Why would they do that? Ask a lot of questions. And this is what Christ does. Hey, where do you get your power to forgive sins from? Well, I'll answer your question if you tell me, where did John the Baptist get his power to baptize from? Teacher, what's the greatest commandment? Well, what do you think they are? I mean, respond to questions with questions. Ask a lot of questions, because this helps to spur the synapses of the other side.
Right.
First of all, it fleshes out false objections, so you know if you're being trolled or not. And then if the individual is ignorant but sincere, you get them, you stoke the pilot light there. You get them going. Make them think, yeah, I've never thought of it that way. That's an interesting point. Now, if they just reply back to you with, because Fauci told me to, okay, they're in a cult. Kick the dust off your sandals, move on to the next town. Don't waste your time. Know what I'm saying? Nobody loves us more than Christ. He looked at his disciples and said, hey, dude, there's a certain point in time, just move on. Okay?
Yeah.
And but that way we know. So ask a lot of questions. And that encourages the other side of the conversation to both reveal their true motivations, and then B, if they're sincere but just ignorant, it encourages them now to take part actively in a conversation that maybe they hadn't thought they had permission to engage in before.
Awesome. Paul, I think we got one more question, and then we gotta cut Steve loose so he can enjoy some family time tonight. One last question for Steve.
So maybe not a question, but an observation. And I know we talked a little bit in the green room or gold room, as we call it, beforehand. We actually have some representation from one of those groups. We are aware of at least 3 major grassroots movements which have national import, which are trying to spin up. You're aware of one of them because Daniel Horowitz is running the Constitutional Action Network.
Yep.
We find that encouraging, and we've seen encouragement here in Texas. Just we've been speaking around the state. We went to one group a few weeks ago, and they've been around since the Tea Party, and they said this activity from grassroots is even greater than we saw during the initial startup of the Tea Party movement. So I kind of want to leave on an encouraging note that it feels like there's activism and people ready to move. And are you hearing that from your contacts you have all around the country as well?
Yes.
Well, that was a quick answer.
I mean, the success of our book, I think, is just anecdotal confirmation of what you're talking about. I mean, we put this thing together. It was an idea of our publisher, came to me in January and said, hey, wow, I think we can swing momentum here against lockdown, but grassroots people need like a compilation of data to make the argument. You guys have done the work for the last year. Can you put this together for us? Wasn't even on our radar. We spent, Todd spent 2 weeks going through a year's worth of work we had done on the show, on this, and on social media, cataloged it for me into various, we outlined the topics we wanted to get to from a chapter standpoint. While he was doing that, I was thinking of what the bookends of the book ought to be, because I think this is bigger than Fauci. And if Fauci had retired or wasn't alive anymore, it would have just been another creature from the Black Lagoon, but largely things would have probably played out the same. Just the personalities would have been different. And so I thought that really kind of needed to be the bookend. So I worked on that while he cataloged all our information. He presented it to me. That made it easy for me to insert it into a singular narrative. We turned it into the publisher around the 1st of March. So 5-6 weeks after he suggested it to us, we decided to not do a traditional publishing deal, which would have made us a lot more money by hardcover and all that other, and distribution in every bookstore. But we thought by then we might miss a window. We might lose another year to this. So let's just put this in paperback right now, charge it for a lot cheaper. And that way we can print on demand and not worry about Amazon claiming we're out. And so it's going to be a 3-month back date. Nope. Right. We can just do instant fulfillment constantly. And so we're in control of the distribution. Amazon is not. That does mean we got to go through Amazon, but it is where 83% of all books are sold anyway. So we didn't have time for a 6-figure or even a 5-figure PR blitz. You know, we all called combined contacts and stuff we have. But this thing went to #1 even before I got on Tucker Carlson's show.
Right.
He put it back to #1. Okay. But we did that just from the capacity of our own audience. And it wasn't just how much our audience has grown on The Blaze. It's how much deeper it's become committed. I cannot tell you how many members of our audience have told me, I bought 5 copies, 10, 15, 20. I've purchased this 4 times. I keep finding new people I want to send it to. And since it's only $15, I kind of feel like every time a new name pops into my head, a few days later, yeah, they need a copy of this book. And so I think the fact that we did this with the kind of, and the way we did it, it was with grassroots energy. That's how we did this.
Right.
That's how we made this a success. That is anecdotal confirmation. We're in a very curious place. There are not enough of us to just instantly topple the spirit of the age, but there are way too many of us for the spirit of the age to just Tiananmen Square us tomorrow.
Correct.
So we're kind of in this Mexican standoff right now, right? We can take advantage of that. And I think the success of our book indicates that there is a market for taking advantage of it. This is ironically the analogy my Catholic co-author made. He came up with it first. This is like a 95 Theses. Mm-hmm. There had been other challengers to papal infallibility and other Roman calls for Roman reformers before Luther. They just didn't have a Gutenberg printing press to get their messages to the masses. Right. And so when the church stomped them down, they went away. But Luther had the printing press. By the time the church can mobilize against him, his message was already out to the masses. Tucker said to me similarly, he said, I can't believe Amazon's publishing this book. And I said to him, I think if you had done it, they wouldn't have. Right. It would have gotten their antennas up right away. I'm not a big enough star yet that it instantly, got their spidey sense tingling. Like, sure, kid, we'll print your book, whatever. And then once it hit #1, they were kind of screwed. Now they jack with the search function and all that other stuff, but that's, passive aggressive mamby-pamby crap. We've already sold nearly 100,000 copies of this book. So I think that is a good place for us to conclude this. That should be your confidence that there's a market for this. And now we've given you the information with this book. Now you can weaponize this information. We've done the recon. And now you go and weaponize the reconnaissance that we put into your hands, because clearly it's a devastating weapon.
Absolutely. Steve, I just want to say thank you so much to all of our grassroots. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You can go to stevedeace.com. That'll take you to his Blaze TV podcast and show. You can sign up if you are not already signed up with the Blaze. Please go and do that. More importantly, we have Mother's Day coming up. Shameless plug for this book. Every mother get her a copy of that book. Steve, we hope that you'll come back when you decide to release your videos. We'd love to be able to work with you. We've got hundreds of thousands of grassroots Here in Texas, we're working with other folks in all kinds of other states, and we'd love to help you get those videos into the hands of the grassroots. And we're ready. We just need more of us to work on the training for these 100 million people who want the training, and I believe want to return to self-governance. And I look forward to working with you, with Grassroots Gold, Paul and I, whatever we can do to help you. Yeah. First and foremost, we'll be praying for you because you have the big microphone and you get to be a leader from that standpoint. But you can know that there are a lot of us standing arm in arm with you and supporting that effort. And we're doing exactly what we need to be doing right in our communities and our backyards.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate all those kind words. Thank you for the time. I enjoy doing these when I have an opportunity. So hopefully you guys got something out of it, and we'll do it again sometime. All right. Take care.
All right.
We will do it. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday at 5:30 Central Time for the next episode. See you then. Have a great night.